Okay, so when it comes to motor control theories in physiology, again, movement is the interaction of perception and action systems with cognition affecting both systems at different levels. Movement control is the cooperative effort of many brain structures organized hierarchically and in parallel. So the hierarchical processing, higher levels of brain concerned with abstraction of information, and then you have parallel distributed processing, which is the same signal processed simultaneously among many different brain structures for different purposes. So depending on where the damage is, we have to understand where the patient is coming from. Do they have damage from a hierarchical processing? Do they have damage to the higher levels of the brain concerned with abstraction of the information? Or do they have difficulty with parallel distributed processing, which is the same signal processed simultaneously? So if one section of the brain doesn't work, is there another section of the brain that can compensate and take over? So those are some good things that we would be able to understand. Now, again, overview of the brain function. The spinal cord is the lowest level of perception action hierarchy. The initial response and processing of somatosensory information, reflex and voluntary control of posture and movement through motor neurons. So if you have damage to the spinal cord at a lower level, it's not going to be, the end of life or anything like that. We can make a lot of things as far as rehab is concerned. They have a lot of potential. So that's the lowest level of perception and action hierarchy. Now, if we go to the brainstem, remember brainstem controls nuclei involved in postural control and locomotion. You have vestibular nuclei. The red nucleus contains ascending and descending pathways transmitting sensory and motor information. So when you have damage to the brainstem, a lot of things can get affected: motor, sensation, balance, visual, you name it. So this is going to be a harder patient to work with than the spinal cord patient. Cerebral hemispheres. Now you have strokes, and depending on which part, that's higher order cognitive aspects. Remember we reviewed the neuroanatomy. There are a lot of things that are at play here, and that patient is going to be difficult to work with, and the rehab is going to be a little bit more involved. The cerebral cortex, remember the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, is the highest level of motor control hierarchy. So identifying targets in space, choosing action of control. So when they have damage to the cerebral cortex, we've got a lot of issues that we're dealing with. Okay, so it's not as easy as damage just to the spinal cord. The neuron is the basic unit of central nervous system. Lowest level in the hierarchy, single neuron in the spinal cord. So if you have just damage to the one neuron, it's no big deal. Now, one thing that you have to realize is that neurons don't undergo mitosis, so they're not susceptible to cancer. Remember, only cells that go through mitosis are susceptible to cancer, so it's very rare for you to get cancer in the neurons. Now, glial cells are different. Glial cells are also found in the brain. They go through mitosis, so whenever you get cancer in the brain, it's usually of glial origin. They always have a negative electrical charge or potential on the inside of the cell. Neuron communicates through synaptic transmission. All right, so understanding how alcohol attacks the brain, and now that you understand how the brain works, then you kind of have a better idea. So if you look at this, how alcohol attacks the brain, the first thing alcohol does, it affects the forebrain and assaults motor coordination, decision making. So that's about 1 drink an hour. Right, so you may, your motor coordination may be a little affected. You might not make the right decisions. You might be lose a little bit of inhibition there, and you might ask somebody out that you shouldn't have, or you might ask somebody that you wanting to, but you didn't have the guts to do it. So that's about a 1. For some of you, that could be 2 drinks. Alcohol knocks out the midbrain, and you lose control over emotions and increase chances of a blackout. So you have to be careful going there. That's a couple drinks an hour. Now, finally, alcohol batters the brainstem and affects the heart rate, body temperature, appetite, and consciousness, a dangerous and potentially fatal condition. That's about 4 to 5 drinks an hour, and now you're asking for trouble. Okay, so you understand how it goes into the brain. So level 1 is 1 to 2 drinks, level 2 is 3 to 4 drinks, and level 3 is about 4 to 5 drinks per hour. So again, alcohol in the brain, the first area compromised is the cortex, which causes confusion and lower inhibitions. Terrible jokes start to seem funny, and you are less afraid to talk to new people or sing bad karaoke. Next hits the cerebellum, altering movement and balance. That's when you fall off the stage after singing said karaoke and your voice starts to slur. Keep drinking and it affects the hypothalamus and the amygdala. That's when crying fits happen and people injure themselves, but don't realize it until you wake up the next day because you forgot because it went through the hypothalamus and amygdala. At this point, the person is acting on animal instincts alone since all our parts of the brain regulating reason have gone offline. If you continue to drink, it can affect the brainstem, which induces sleep, can cause irregular breathing, and you can even go into seizures. So often, even one binge event can lead to untimely death, as you see in the hazing events. Okay? Unfortunately, most stop drinking or pass out before this level of impairment. And again, this is alcohol in the brain, 0.05, you have impaired judgment, relaxed inhibitions, altered mood, increased heart rate. 0.10, which is legally drunk in most states, impaired coordination, delayed reaction time, exaggerated emotions, impaired peripheral vision, impaired ability to operate a vehicle. 0.15, slurred speech. 0.20, double vision. 0.30, uninhibited behavior. And 0.4 is mostly coma and death. How do you know what your BAC level is? It depends. So for example, a 100-pound female can become legally drunk by drinking 3 beers an hour, whereas a 220-pound male consuming that amount at the same rate would have 0.05. So a 220-pound male can drink about 4 to 5 beers an hour and still be under the legal limit, whereas a 100-pound female, so 3 beers an hour, which is still a lot, but it can take you to the bad karaoke easily. All right, there it is. There's the brain in a nutshell.